On the trading floor, screens flash red before dying completely. Traders are screaming, slamming dead phones against their desks as trillions of dollars vanish in real time. But the real crime scene is entirely silent. 2 miles beneath the freezing Atlantic, a remote-operated submersible extends a massive steel cutter. It snaps a single, glowing, fiber-optic line. The cloud is a lie. Your digital life is just physical wires buried in the cold, dark mud. Every dollar in your bank account, the life support monitors in your local hospital, the nuclear early warning grids keeping the peace, they all hang by a thread, literally. They rely on cables no thicker than a standard garden hose, lying completely unprotected in international waters. A single, coordinated cut across the seabed means modern society collapses in exactly 72 hours. If you think the internet is safely floating in the sky, you are a sitting duck. We are going to the absolute front lines of the most critical, least understood war on Earth. I will take you deep into the abyss to witness the exact physical vulnerabilities of the internet. You will see the hostile actors waiting in the dark, armed with submersibles designed for sabotage. We are standing on the edge of a digital dark age, and the countdown has already begun. The battlefield is not in the air. It is at the bottom of the ocean. Look at the heavy maintenance vessel pitching violently in the 30-foot swells of the North Atlantic. Ice forms on the massive steel drum on the deck as it slowly unspools a stark black cable into the churning slate-gray ocean. We track this wire down past the sunlit zone, diving into the crushing, freezing pressure of the abyss until it rests quietly in the deep silt. This single, unimpressive hose carries the combined digital lives of millions. You have been sold a comforting illusion. Tech billionaires launch rockets every week, filling the low Earth orbit with shining constellations of metal. You look to the sky, assuming your text messages, your streaming movies, and your secure military communications bounce off those satellites. But that is the great deception. Despite the relentless hype surrounding satellite technology, over 99% of all international digital traffic runs through the mud. Satellites simply lack the sheer physical capacity to carry the weight of human civilization. They handle less than 1% of global data transmission. If you tried to route the New York Stock Exchange through a satellite uplink, the latency would trigger a catastrophic market crash within seconds. The laws of physics demand a physical tether. Light must travel through glass to move at the speeds our economy requires to survive the day. And those vital, life-sustaining arteries are shockingly fragile. When you picture the backbone of the global internet, you probably envision massive, impenetrable pipelines. The reality is terrifying. A standard deep-sea fiber optic cable is roughly the diameter of a garden hose. It is wrapped in a thin layer of polyurethane and a woven sheath of steel wire, offering only a pathetic modicum of protection against the crushing pressure and hostile threats of the abyss. Right now, there are over 500 active cable systems snaking across the jagged topography of the ocean floor. They span approximately 800,000 miles of treacherous underwater terrain. That is enough physical wire to wrap around the Earth over 30 times. It is a sprawling, unprotected nervous system laid bare across a global battlefield. And every single inch of that wire is a potential target for a catastrophic strike. We treat this infrastructure with the casual negligence of a peacetime society. But the seafloor is not a peaceful domain. It is a hostile, lawless frontier, where the pressure exceeds 10,000 pounds per square inch. Here, a microscopic fracture in the glass core can corrupt the encrypted communications of a carrier strike group. The ocean itself is trying to destroy these cables every second of every day, even before the saboteurs arrive. I've watched engineers pull these lines from the depths, the steel armor sheared clean off by underwater landslides or dragged anchors. The damage is visceral. When a cable snaps, it does not just trigger a silent error code on a server rack in Silicon Valley. It rips a physical hole in our global security apparatus. Entire nations can go dark in the blink of an eye, completely severed from the global consciousness and the global economy. Inside that narrow garden hose are strands of ultra-pure glass, each barely the thickness of a human hair. Through those microscopic corridors, lasers pulse billions of times per second, moving data at the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second. That light is your bank transfer. That light is the drone strike command. If the glass shatters, the light stops. And when the light stops, the modern world bleeds out in the dark. Because this network is invisible, it is utterly forgotten by the public. We build smart cities and algorithmic trading houses, assuming the foundation is invincible. But the foundation is just fiberglass resting in the dirt, guarded by nothing but the immense, crushing weight of salt water. We have outsourced our survival to the most unforgiving environment on the planet, leaving the central nervous system of humanity entirely exposed to attack. Hostile states know exactly where these lines are buried. They do not need to launch nuclear warheads or stage massive land invasions to cripple the West. They only need to drop a grappling hook or deploy a silent drone. The map of these subsea cables is the definitive battleground of the 21st century. It is a map of choke points and vulnerabilities where a single bloodless cut can achieve what 1,000 bombers never could. You have lived your entire digital life under a massive, comforting delusion. You thought the wireless revolution untethered us from the ground. You thought the data floating in the cloud was invincible to physical destruction. But the higher we build our digital towers, the more heavily we rely on the fragile, buried roots holding them up. We are completely dependent on an underwater environment we cannot even see, let alone defend. This is the great satellite lie. We constantly look to the sky for our connection, scanning the heavens for signals and salvation. We marvel at the orbital grids and the promise of wireless supremacy. But the true master of our fate does not orbit in the vacuum of space. The true master of our fate lies 20,000 feet below sea level, ticking down to the moment the wires finally snap. So, who is currently waiting in the darkness to make the cut? To find who is currently waiting in the dark, you have to know exactly where to look. The analyst in this cramped, windowless intelligence bunker does not scan the open ocean. He stares at a digital map glowing under harsh fluorescent lights, his eyes locked on the geographic death traps, where our infinite digital realm is choked down to physical corridors, barely wider than a football field. This is the Achilles heel of our global geography. We designed an internet that feels boundless and omnipresent. Yet every email, every classified military order, and every financial transaction must physically squeeze through narrow, unavoidable trenches on the seafloor. The analyst traces a glowing red line through the map, watching thousands of miles of deep-sea fiber converge into a single, terrifying bottleneck. The ocean floor is not a flat, forgiving plain. It is a hostile, jagged nightmare of massive underwater mountain ranges and abyssal trenches. Engineers cannot simply lay glass wherever they want. They are forced by brutal geology to bundle these vital lifelines together into narrow, predictable valleys. To the intelligence officer watching the sonar feeds, these bundled lines are not a marvel of engineering. They are sitting ducks. His screen highlights the most critical vulnerability on the planet: the route through Egypt and the Red Sea. Here, the entire digital bridge between Europe and Asia is reduced to just 16 major cables. They lie clustered together in shallow waters, completely exposed. This is not just a transit corridor. It is the unprotected jugular vein of the global economy, pumping exabytes of data every single second. If you want to paralyze half the world, you do not need a sophisticated cyber weapon. You do not need to hack firewalls or write complex malicious code. You only need a rudimentary explosive charge placed in this exact stretch of water. The analyst taps the screen. The red lines blinking in the Red Sea represent a single point of failure. A physical strike here guarantees immediate, cascading digital collapse across 3 continents. We have already witnessed the dress rehearsal for this catastrophe. In 2024, localized military conflicts in the Red Sea violently demonstrated the fragility of this corridor. Within hours of the escalation, 4 major subsea cables were severed. Alarms in network operations centers screamed as 25% of all data traffic across the Middle East was instantly degraded. For the analyst reviewing the aftermath, that incident was a terrifying proof of concept. It proved that the cloud bleeds when you hit it with kinetic force. Financial markets shuttered, regional logistics software froze, and military communications were forced to instantly reroute. The 2024 severing was an accident of war, collateral damage from localized strikes. But it handed hostile states a flawless blueprint for intentional sabotage. The threat is not isolated to the Middle East. The officer shifts the map eastward, zooming in on the Strait of Malacca. This is another massive geographical choke point. It is a notoriously narrow, highly trafficked shipping lane where the water is dangerously shallow. Millions of dollars of cargo float directly above the fragile glass threads that process the financial clearing for those exact same shipments. In the Strait of Malacca, you do not even need an explosive charge to cause an international crisis. A simple, dragging anchor from a commercial freighter routinely hooks the seabed. With a violent shudder of a heavy iron chain, the glass snaps. Instantly, millions of users are ripped offline in Southeast Asia. A mundane navigational error immediately triggers a massive blackout of banking applications and regional power grid monitoring. This is the exact scenario that keeps intelligence analysts awake for days. The inherent chaos of these narrow shipping lanes provides the ultimate cover for a targeted strike. How do you distinguish a clumsy freighter captain from a deliberate act of state-sponsored sabotage? When an anchor tears through a multi-billion-dollar data conduit, there is no smoking gun. There is only silence on the network and absolute, plausible deniability. We are watching a countdown timer that the public refuses to acknowledge. Every day, more data, more wealth, and more military commands are crammed into these exact same geographical death traps. The analyst constantly monitors acoustic sonar signatures, searching for the slightest anomaly near these critical hubs. He knows that hostile actors are already mapping the sea floor, probing our blind spots, and calculating the exact blast radius needed. Our reliance on these bundled physical pathways defies all strategic logic. We have engineered a global civilization that demands absolute connectivity, yet we route its very lifeblood through hostile, untamable environments. We are daring the abyss to cut the cord. The map in the bunker is not just a diagram of cables. It is a target list. and the red lines pulsing on the screen are glowing brighter under the strain of an impending strike. The intelligence officer finally steps back from the monitors, the harsh light reflecting off his exhausted face. He understands the brutal math of this shadow war. The internet is not failing because of a glitch in the software. It is failing because we laid our physical throat across the anvil of the ocean floor, right in the middle of the most contested waters on Earth. The trap is perfectly set. Now, we wait for the hammer to fall. When that hammer falls, the impact does not echo in the silent depths of the ocean. It strikes right here, in the deafening roar of the New York Stock Exchange. We know the geographical choke points are hopelessly vulnerable, but the true terror lies in the speed of the fallout. A severed line in the Red Sea does not just disrupt data, it instantly detonates a financial yield equivalent to a nuclear strike. You are standing on the frenzied trading floor. Above you, a massive digital clock ticks down the milliseconds, dictating the pulse of the global economy. This is the absolute front line of modern survival. The air is thick with adrenaline, and the shouted orders of brokers executing trades at the speed of light. But they are completely blind to the physical reality of the fragile glass threads keeping their entire universe alive. This brings us to a terrifying realization about the speed of money. Wealth is no longer backed by stacks of gold sitting safely in heavily fortified underground vaults. Modern finance is nothing more than photons traveling through optical glass at 186,000 miles per second. Stop the photon, and you stop the world. The entire capitalist system is a continuous stream of light, and right now, that light is utterly exposed. Suddenly, the massive arrays of screens above the trading floor flicker wildly. The rapid-fire stream of green and red tickers freezes. Then, a collective gasp rips through the room as every single monitor plunges into pitch black. Traders are screaming into dead phones, slamming receivers, their faces pale with sudden realization. You are watching the physical sensation of trillions of dollars evaporating in real time. This is not a software glitch. The SWIFT banking system, the secure messaging spine for the financial institutions of the world, has just lost its physical connection. This network relies entirely on those deep-sea cables to clear over $10 trillion in daily transactions. $10 trillion, flowing through a tube the width of your thumb, sitting unprotected in international waters. The money is gone. The panic on the floor morphs into sheer, unadulterated terror. Fortunes built over decades are erased in a fraction of a heartbeat because a piece of glass cracked in the cold mud 3 miles below the surface. You cannot reboot this system. You cannot deploy a software patch to fix a physical laceration in the ocean floor. The digital lifeblood of civilization is bleeding out into the freezing salt water, and nobody can stop it. Modern algorithmic trading operates on a latency scale measured strictly in milliseconds. To understand this insanity, look at the Hibernia Express cable laid across the Atlantic Ocean. Financial firms spent $300 million to build that specific line solely to shave a pathetic 6 milliseconds off the trading time between London and New York. That is the premium we place on speed, while entirely ignoring survival. When an algorithmic trading bot expects a response in under 20 milliseconds and receives absolute silence, the entire system spirals into an uncontrolled cascading failure. Automated safeguards trigger, firewalls slam shut, and liquidity vanishes from the global market instantly. You are witnessing a synchronized global heart attack, orchestrated by a single severed cord hidden in the dark. The cost of this forced silence is apocalyptic. If the transatlantic cable routes were fully severed in a coordinated strike, the immediate freeze in the financial markets is catastrophic. Economic models project this paralysis would cost the global economy an estimated $100 million every single minute. A targeted sabotage operation does not need to bomb a city to destroy it. They just need a pair of heavy, hydraulic shears. The devastation refuses to stay contained within the walls of the stock exchange. The financial hemorrhage instantly bleeds out from the trading floor and violently impacts the streets outside. The screens here went dark, but the real catastrophe is quietly activating in the pockets, homes, and vehicles of billions of completely unaware citizens. The countdown timer has officially started, and the first casualties are already registering. Within exactly 48 hours of a major coordinated blackout, the infrastructure of daily life disintegrates. Automated teller machines cease to function entirely, transforming bank cards into useless plastic. Supply chain logistics software, the invisible web coordinating the delivery of food and medicine, freezes completely. The trucks stop rolling. The cargo ships sit idle in the harbor. The system collapses under its own weight. You walk into a local supermarket and face the terrifying reality of a disconnected world. Grocery store shelves begin to empty rapidly as panic buying overwhelms the paralyzed supply chains. Digital payments are rejected. Cash becomes meaningless when the registers cannot communicate with the central servers. The comfortable illusion of modern security shatters completely, leaving behind a frantic, starving population locked in the dark. We engineered a society that requires infinite connectivity to simply feed itself, and we staked our very survival on an undefended perimeter at the bottom of the sea. The money has stopped moving. The food is no longer arriving. This is not an abstract theory of economic degradation. It is a rapid, terminal nosedive into the abyss. We are now officially on the clock, and the forces hiding in the deep are just getting started. The money stops. The food stops. This existential vulnerability is blood in the water. We built a doomsday machine for our own economy, and that instantly attracts predators looking for a bloodless kill. The financial stakes are so unfathomably high, they draw in hostile state actors preparing for the ultimate decapitation strike. Drop down from the starving cities to 20,000 feet below sea level. No light, just murky, green-tinted sonar imaging pulsing on a screen inside a windowless intelligence bunker. The subsea analyst watches the feed, paralyzed. A massive, unnatural shape glides silently toward a vital seabed cable array. The hunt has begun. This is the Ghost Fleet. You are conditioned by decades of Cold War paranoia to watch the skies for hypersonic missiles and falling warheads. You are looking the wrong way. The next world war is not launching from a silo. It is being prepped right now, in absolute silence, by submarines built strictly to blind us. Through the cold, calculating eyes of the intelligence analyst, these sonar blips are not random patrols. Hostile navies are systematically mapping the exact coordinates of NATO's critical deep-sea infrastructure. It is standard operating procedure. They are aggressively laying the groundwork for a synchronized zero-day attack. This is the true front line of the 21st century. No artillery barrages, no infantry charges. Just a slow, methodical shadow game, played at crushing depths. If an adversary knows exactly where the transatlantic nervous system lies, they hold the digital kill switch for Western civilization in the palm of their hand. Look at the Russian Naval Command structure. They operate a highly secretive branch known as the Main Directorate of Deep Sea Research, or GUGI. This is not your standard fleet. GUGI commands a terrifying arsenal of specialized nuclear submarines, including massive, heavily modified vessels like the Belgorod. The Belgorod does not primarily carry standard explosive torpedoes. It operates as an underwater mothership. It is specifically designed to deploy smaller, hyper-advanced submersibles that dive down to directly tap or sever cables at depths of 20,000 feet. At that extreme depth, they operate with total impunity. But military hardware is only half the threat. The analyst tracks a much more insidious maneuver known as the dark ship phenomenon. Up on the surface, seemingly harmless commercial fishing trawlers and supposedly civilian research vessels constantly crisscross these vital, unprotected digital arteries. Suddenly, the tracking signal vanishes. These ostensibly civilian ships routinely switch off their automated tracking transponders. They go completely dark, loitering suspiciously over key transatlantic fiber nodes for days at a time. We are losing signal on the exact vessels hovering right above our societal life support. A severed fiber optic cable at the bottom of the ocean leaves no DNA, no shrapnel, and no explosive residue. It is the ultimate perfect crime in modern warfare. A hostile state actor can casually drag a heavy iron anchor across the seabed, rip millions of people offline, and simply claim it was a case of gross maritime negligence. It is an act of catastrophic warfare, perfectly camouflaged as a clumsy maritime accident. They plunge an adversary into total financial and social chaos, while maintaining absolute plausible deniability. You cannot launch a retaliatory nuclear strike over a supposedly careless fishing boat, dragging its nets too deep. The intelligence analyst watches the green pulse of the sonar, completely powerless to stop the ongoing reconnaissance. The ocean is simply too vast to patrol. The physical cables are far too exposed. Every suspicious loiter, every dark ship going silent on the radar, brings us one step closer to the tipping point. We are sitting ducks in a lightless, freezing shooting gallery. The fragile infrastructure that keeps your heart beating, your logistics moving, and your money flowing is actively targeted by an invisible enemy right under our noses. The blade is already pressed firmly against the wire, waiting for the order to cut. The blade finally slices through the polyurethane jacket, severing the glass core in a fraction of a second. You do not hear the explosion, but you feel the immediate, violently cascading shockwave as the light simply stops. We have spent the last hour staring into the faces of the saboteurs, hovering in the lightless depths. But now we must witness the catastrophic simulation of their success. This is what the first 3 hours of a coordinated blackout actually look like. The collapse does not begin with fire in the streets. It starts with a terrifying, absolute silence on the air traffic control radar screens. Thousands of commercial flights are suddenly circling blindly in the upper atmosphere, stripped of their telemetry and weather data. Down below, the synchronized traffic lights of a major metropolis simultaneously flash to a dead, unblinking yellow. The algorithms managing the flow of millions of commuters simply evaporate into the digital void. Step inside the intensive care unit of any modern hospital, and you will see the true cost of our blind faith in the cloud. The glowing monitors tracking patient vitals, connected to off-site artificial intelligence databases, instantly flatline to error screens. Doctors are violently thrown back to the dark ages, scrambling for emergency paper records while backup generators struggle to keep the essential physical life support systems running. The digital anesthesia wears off instantly. This is not a dystopian fantasy. It is a meticulously rehearsed reality. In 2022, an unexplained, simultaneous severance of subsea cables off the coast of the south of France proved exactly how fast the dominoes fall. In an instant, that surgical strike degraded internet access across Europe, plunged parts of Asia into a severe digital bottleneck, and choked data centers all the way to the United States. It was a terrifying, real-world proof of concept for saboteurs. A hostile state does not need to deploy a massive armada to sever all 500 active cables on the ocean floor to send us back to the 19th century. The architecture of the Internet is built on dynamic routing, which means data automatically searches for the next available path when a roadblock appears. But this survival mechanism is exactly what a sophisticated adversary will weaponize against us to trigger a fatal, unstoppable heart attack in the global system. By surgically severing just 3 strategic geographic nodes simultaneously, the sudden, frantic rerouting of global digital traffic is forced into a rapidly shrinking pipe. This tidal wave of panicked data overloads the routers on the surviving cables, triggering a cascading hardware failure known in network engineering as a broadcast storm. The physical switches literally melt down under the impossible computational load, destroying the very infrastructure meant to save us. I have spent months analyzing these classified vulnerability reports, and the realization is utterly paralyzing. We built a civilization completely dependent on continuous data flow, yet we left the central nervous system entirely exposed in international waters. The broadcast storm does not just erase your bank account. It instantly severs the invisible threads holding human society together. When the glass stops glowing, the illusion of our technological supremacy shatters with it. The sheer scale of this engineering fragility is terrifying, but understanding the exact mechanics of this looming blackout is your only defense against the panic. If this realization of how easily our entire digital world can be erased blows your mind too, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel right now. Tell me in the comments below, do you think your local community is prepared to survive 72 hours completely cut off from the global electrical and data grid? Once the screens go dark and the broadcast storm claims the final remaining routers, the immediate, most devastating casualty is not the economy. It is absolute trust. Without secure, encrypted communication lines, regional military commands cannot verify incoming orders or distinguish a communications drill from a preemptive nuclear strike. A localized blackout instantly mutates into a profound strategic vulnerability, creating a fog of war thicker than anything we have ever experienced. Down on the streets, the civilian population is completely blinded. Emergency broadcast systems, heavily reliant on Internet protocol architecture, fail to deliver critical evacuation routes or safety protocols to mobile devices. You pick up your phone to call for help, to check on your family, or to find out if this is a temporary glitch or an act of war, and you are met with a chilling, dead screen. The silence itself becomes the most effective weapon in the enemy's entire arsenal. A saboteur understands that they do not need to fire a single kinetic missile into a city to destroy it. They simply need to let human psychology do the heavy lifting. Panic is the ultimate secondary weapon. When the digital logistics software that restocks grocery store shelves freezes, and the digital payments at the gas pumps are instantly declined, the thin veneer of civilized society evaporates in less than 12 hours. Fear spreads faster than any biological virus ever could. I'm watching the theoretical models run inside the intelligence bunker, and the timeline is consistently brutal. By hour 3 of the coordinated cut, the modern world is functionally paralyzed. The global nervous system is bleeding out into the freezing mud of the ocean floor, and there is no software patch, no cloud backup, and no wireless satellite constellation capable of bridging a gap this unimaginably massive. We are entirely at the mercy of the severed physical wire. As the dark metropolis devolves into chaos and the financial markets flatline, the desperate realization sets in that no artificial intelligence or autonomous drone can save us from this abyss. To stitch the bleeding arteries of the global economy back together, we are forced to rely on a shockingly primitive solution. Out in the violent 30-foot swells of the freezing ocean, a handful of exhausted men are preparing to throw heavy iron grappling hooks into the absolute dark. Society is flatlining, bleeding out into the digital void, and right now, the only thing standing between you and the collapse of the modern era is absolute brute force. Out in the furious 30-foot swells of the North Atlantic, there are no software updates and no emergency cloud backups. There is only the freezing spray, the deafening roar of the wind, and a desperate crew preparing to drag heavy iron through the absolute dark. I am standing on the violently pitching deck of a heavy maintenance vessel. Ice water is crashing over the bow, soaking the deckhands in their high-visibility gear. Through the eyes of the repair ship captain, this is not a theoretical cyber war. This is a brutal, industrial fight against the most hostile elements on planet Earth. Alarms are blaring from the bridge, signaling that we are directly over the kill zone. This is the ultimate paradox of our 21st century. We built an omnipotent digital utopia, a matrix of artificial intelligence and instantaneous global finance. But when the most advanced technology humanity has ever conceived gets severed in the abyss, it is not rescued by autonomous drones. It is rescued by exhausted men dragging giant metal hooks through the freezing mud. We are the analog saviors of the digital age. You might assume that a vulnerability this catastrophic, the physical severance of our global nervous system, would be protected by an armada of highly advanced rapid-response naval squadrons. You would be dead wrong. The defense line is shockingly, terrifyingly thin. As the financial markets continue to bleed billions every single minute, we are looking at the true, terrifying scale of our emergency infrastructure. There are barely 60 dedicated cable repair ships operating on the entire planet. Let that number sink in. 60 aging vessels are solely responsible for maintaining the physical backbone of the world economy. If multiple coordinated cuts occur simultaneously across different oceans, as the intelligence models predict, this tiny fleet will be instantly overwhelmed. The triage decisions will leave entire nations stranded in the dark. But before this ship can even begin to haul the severed artery out of the deep, they have to find it. You are looking for a wire the width of a garden hose hidden somewhere along an underwater mountain range, buried under thousands of feet of crushing, lightless water. It is the ultimate needle in a planetary haystack. The captain cannot send down a diver, and sonar is virtually useless against a target this incredibly small. The solution relies on raw physics. When the line snaps, the shore stations immediately pulse a high-voltage current down the surviving wire. By precisely measuring the electrical resistance from the shore down to the exposed end resting in the salt water, engineers can calculate the exact distance to the break. They can pinpoint the fatal wound down to the exact mile, guiding the ship through the massive storm to the drop zone. We arrive at the coordinates, and the true nightmare begins. The captain holds the vessel steady against gale-force winds, using dynamic positioning thrusters that scream against the churning gray ocean. Every second we waste here means another hospital goes entirely offline, another supply chain collapses, and the global panic deepens. The command is given, and the heavy winch on the aft deck begins to unspool. You are watching a salvage operation that defies the modern era. Despite the trillions of dollars at stake, the actual technique of recovering a deep-sea cable has barely evolved since the first transatlantic telegraph lines were laid in the 1850s. There is no surgical precision out here. There is only gravity, extreme tension, and blind hope sinking into the freezing, crushing depths directly below the hull. The crew drops a massive, multi-ton iron grappling hook directly into the abyss. It plummets thousands of feet down until it violently hits the silt. And then, the ship simply drives forward, dragging this enormous metal claw blindly across the ocean floor. They are literally scraping the seabed, tearing through the mud and rock, praying to snag the broken wire before the geopolitical countdown clock completely runs out. Suddenly, the massive steel winch groans, pulling taut. The tension meters immediately spike into the red zone. They caught it. Slowly, agonizingly, the winch grinds in reverse, hauling the catch up through the heavy water column. Finally, a thick, mud-caked cable breaks the surface of the foaming ocean. It is a brutalized, jagged stump of wire, the severed throat of the internet, hauled onto the freezing steel deck. But pulling the cable from the deep is only half the battle. Now, the chaotic, violent brute force of the ocean must instantly give way to microscopic, surgical precision. The crew wrestles the severed ends into a specialized module on the ship. The roaring wind and crashing waves are shut out behind a heavy steel door, and we enter an entirely different world of high stakes, extremely delicate microscopic engineering. Inside the ship is a highly pressurized, sterile clean room. The contrast is violently jarring. Outside, a hurricane is trying to capsize the vessel, but inside, engineers are preparing to splice the fiber-optic glass strands that carry the light of human knowledge. The deck is violently pitching up and down, dropping 30 feet with every swell, while the technicians must execute a repair measured in fractions of a millimeter. The stakes inside this sterile chamber are unfathomable. Splicing the shattered fiber-optic glass requires absolute perfection. A single speck of dust, a microscopic bead of moisture, or a tiny misalignment in the splice will severely degrade the signal. If they fail, the data transmission of an entire continent is completely ruined, and the multi-million-dollar repair operation has to start all over again in the storm. This is the terrifying fragility of our connected world. The survival of our financial markets, our military commands, and our digital lives rests in the frozen, bleeding hands of a few dozen sailors splicing glass in a hurricane. But even as this captain fights the ocean to stitch the network back together, an entirely new, massive threat is emerging. The very data we are trying to save is mutating, growing too heavy for the wire. That mutating data, growing impossibly heavy for the storm-battered wires, is the sound of a new apex predator waking up. While repair crews desperately fight 30-foot swells in the Atlantic, an entirely different kind of front line is freezing over. We are losing the race against our own creation. The sheer volume of synthetic thought is violently outpacing the physical infrastructure we must save. You have to look north, far beyond the temperate shipping lanes, into the Arctic Circle. Here, buried in the snow, sits a hyperscale data center. Inside, rows of liquid-cooled servers emit a deafening, intense hum. They are processing trillions of parameters for artificial intelligence models.
This synthetic brain generates immense, blistering heat. It requires the freezing atmosphere of the polar north just to keep the silicon from melting down.
This is the terrifying reality of the data tsunami. We built artificial intelligence thinking it was just invisible code floating in an ethereal cloud. But an algorithm does not just need pure computing power. It needs to relentlessly eat the world's data, and right now, it is absolutely starving. It consumes text, video, and human behavior, dragging all of it through the very same fragile garden hoses lying in the ocean mud. Every single prompt you type, every synthetic image generated, forces a physical beam of light to blast across the abyssal plain. This ravenous appetite is violently warping the physical geography of the Internet. The old telecommunication companies, the ones who laid the original backbone, can no longer handle the sheer, crushing mass of this traffic. The arteries are hardening, and the system is approaching a lethal stroke. The numbers are staggering and extremely dangerous. The sudden explosion of generative artificial intelligence is breaking the system. It drove a 400% increase in global bandwidth demand since 2022. That is not a gradual curve. That is a vertical wall of data slamming into an underwater grid built for an era before machines learned how to speak. When the infrastructure fails to keep up with the algorithm, the masters of the algorithm take control of the ocean. Tech giants like Google, Meta, and Microsoft saw the impending bottleneck. They realized that whoever controls the physical glass controls the future of human cognition. And they decided they could no longer rely on the fragile, shared lifelines of the old world. These corporations are no longer just renting space on aging telecommunication cables. They are actively building and owning their own private transoceanic networks. They are deploying immense capital to sink their private glass to the seabed, fighting to guarantee their artificial intelligence supremacy. The Internet is being privatized in the dark, thousands of feet underwater. But owning the wire is not enough if you lay it in a death trap. The old routes, plunging through the Red Sea or the crowded Strait of Malacca, are compromised. As we saw, those narrow corridors are choked with hostile submarines and dragging anchors. You cannot run a trillion-dollar artificial intelligence empire through a geopolitical war zone where one cut blindingly paralyzes the network. To bypass the highly vulnerable choke points of the Middle East and the Pacific, engineers are doing something desperate. They're carving new, exceptionally treacherous trans-Arctic routes. They are directly capitalizing on rapidly melting ice fields to drag heavy, armored cables straight across the North Pole. It is a brutal, high-stakes gamble against one of the most hostile environments on Earth. Look outside the Arctic server farm. An immense nuclear-powered icebreaker relentlessly carves a black path through the frozen, cracking sea. Trailing behind its reinforced steel hull is a specialized cable, heavily armored to survive the grinding pressure of tectonic ice plates. They are laying the new nervous system of the world in waters so lethal that a repair operation is almost physically impossible. Because the artificial intelligence requires unimaginable speed, these new megacables incorporate a technology called spatial division multiplexing. By splitting the light cores inside the glass, they're pushing over 500 terabits per second through a single freezing strand. That is enough bandwidth to download the entire library of human history in a fraction of a heartbeat. By cramming 500 terabits of strategic data into a single trans-Arctic wire, we have inadvertently created a doomsday scenario. These ultra-dense, privatized cables instantly become the most valuable targets on the planet. A hostile state does not need to cut 10 cables in the Red Sea anymore. They just need to find the one megacable beneath the ice to lobotomize our most advanced systems. This is the front line of the new Cold War, shifting from the deep mud to the polar ice caps. We are building a global superbrain, an artificial mind that will dictate the future of warfare, economics, and medicine. Yet, we are exposing its vital arteries in the darkest, least defensible regions of the globe. The tension is unbearable. We are feeding the beast, but leaving its throat entirely exposed.
The sheer isolation of these Arctic cables makes them an intelligence operative's absolute nightmare. There is no coastal radar here. There are no patrol ships casually passing by. Under the thick, shifting sea ice, an unmarked submersible can easily loiter for months, completely undetected. They can attach a parasitic listening device or preposition a remotely detonated explosive charge in total silence. We are desperately trying to outrun the physical limits of our planet to satisfy the ravenous hunger of the algorithm. But every new mile of glass we drop into the crushing black water only expands the battlefield. We are not escaping the threat. We are merely moving it to deeper, colder waters. The global network is fracturing under the pressure, fundamentally changing the map of the modern world. We leave the violent, shifting ice of the Arctic and the frantic hum of the liquid-cooled server farms behind. I'm standing now on a quiet, wind-swept beach at night. The ocean is black and seemingly empty. The storm feels distant, reduced to the rhythmic crashing of the waves against the shore. But buried just beneath my boots, inside a nameless concrete bunker, a glowing fiber-optic strand pulses with the heartbeat of humanity. The silence here is a lie. For years, we reported on this invisible front line as if it were a distant, abstract theater of operations. But that single strand of glass cutting through the sand proves that the battlefield ends at our front door. We survived the initial skirmishes. The global blackout was averted this time, thanks to those exhausted crews dragging grappling hooks through the mud. But the collateral damage of this shadow war is already permanent. The grand utopian vision of the early web is officially dead. We genuinely believed that the internet would be an invincible, borderless nervous system uniting the globe. We thought the free flow of information would dissolve national boundaries forever. Instead, the sheer terror of the abyss has triggered a massive retreat. The fear of a severed connection is actively tearing the open web apart, forcing it into heavily armed, walled fortresses. This is the era of the splinternet. Major world powers have looked at the terrifying vulnerability of the deep sea and decided that a globally shared network is a massive tactical liability. They are rapidly constructing redundant, sovereign cable systems, intentionally isolated from the rest of the planet. We are retreating into digital bunkers, terrified that a single dropped anchor or a targeted explosive charge will erase our national wealth in an instant. The military establishment has finally woken up to this critical exposure. NATO has now officially classified the seabed as an active domain of warfare, placing it on the exact same strategic level as airspace or cybersecurity. They have established completely new command centers dedicated exclusively to monitoring and protecting underwater infrastructure. The realization has hit the Pentagon that you cannot defend the cloud if you do not control the mud. I have spent this journey tracking acoustic sonar signatures and speaking with the analysts staring at the digital bleeding edge. And the conclusion is absolute. We are witnessing the unprecedented militarization of the abyssal plain. The future of geopolitical dominance will not be decided by fighter jets in the stratosphere or satellites in low Earth orbit.
It is being fought right now in the crushing, lightless trenches of the ocean floor. When we started this investigation, you likely looked up at the sky, assuming your digital life bounced safely between invisible satellites. We all bought into the great wireless myth. Now you know the grueling physical reality. You have seen the choke points in the Red Sea and the ghost fleets loitering in the Atlantic. You understand that our $10 trillion daily economy is literally hanging by a thread the width of a garden hose. We built the most complex, rapidly evolving civilization in human history, governed by artificial intelligence and high-frequency trading algorithms. Yet its survival depends on 19th century technology. We are laying down millions of miles of microscopic glass in the most hostile, corrosive environment on Earth, hoping our adversaries will simply play by the rules. It is an act of breathtaking technological arrogance, and the bill is coming due. Every text message you send, every digital dollar you transfer, every medical record keeping a patient alive in a hospital, it all has a physical weight. It must travel through the dark. The cloud is the greatest marketing illusion ever sold to the public. There is no cloud. There is only a physical cord resting in the silt, surrounded by freezing water and nuclear submarines operating under the radar. Reality is stubbornly tethered to the seafloor. If we fail to secure these vital arteries, the consequences are terminal. A synchronized strike on just 3 strategic nodes will not just cause a temporary inconvenience. It will plunge us into a modern dark age within 72 hours. We will lose our history, our wealth, and our ability to coordinate a defense. The digital age, with all its miraculous advancements, could easily become nothing more than a brief, brilliant flash of light before a very long dark. You can no longer look at your screens with the same naive trust. The seamless, instant connection you take for granted is being defended at this very second by exhausted crews on pitching decks in the North Atlantic and by intelligence analysts watching green sonar screens in windowless basements. They are holding the line, but the infrastructure is tapped out. The invisible shield protecting your bank account is fracturing under immense pressure. We have exposed the absolute front lines of this shadow war, but the geopolitical landscape of the ocean floor is shifting every single day. If this investigation shattered your perception of the digital world and gave you a new perspective on our fragile reality, hit the like button so we know we are digging in the right trenches. And if you want to continue this critical research with me, subscribe to the channel. The war for the abyss is far from over. The ocean is vast, and our wires are small. As the superpowers carve up the seabed into heavily armed sovereign territories, the threat of a single, catastrophic cut grows exponentially. We have built our utopia on the edge of a knife, trusting the most merciless environment on the planet to protect our most precious vulnerabilities. The storm has not passed. It is merely gathering strength just beneath the waves, waiting for the command to strike. The next time you look out at the seemingly empty horizon of the ocean, remember what lies beneath the surface. It is not just water and marine life. It is the physical manifestation of human progress, wrapped in steel and resting in the mud. We are tethered to the deep, and our survival depends entirely on keeping those fragile lights burning in the terrifying dark. This is the ultimate front line of the modern world. Signing off.